completely, not restructured or frozen, but to be dissolved. Secondly, every single officer and corporal and agent and informer in that agency must be put on trial.
Today, on the walls of the abandoned complex that came to symbolize the oppression Egyptians endured under the previous regime, a simple message left by the protesters. This is the fate of the oppressors. Ayman Muhyiddin, AlJazeera, Nasser City.
An Egyptian cabinet reshuffle announced on Sunday will see 3 new faces in key posts. The Prime Minister's office named Nabil El Arabi as the country's new foreign minister. He's a former judge at the International Court of Justice, and he was a permanent representative to the UN. Meanwhile, the new interior and justice ministers have pledged to fight corruption. In Yemen, at least 1 person has died in clashes with government loyalists. 52 protesters are wounded in Ib city, that's 190 kilometers south of the capital, Sana'a. And another member of parliament has resigned from the ruling party, the 14th in the past week. Sheikh Hassan Ali Annan quit in protest at the government's treatment of protesters. Saudi Arabia is reported to be building up its security forces in the east. Now, this comes in response to the protests there. They were calling for more rights for Shia Muslims. New video posted on a social media website appears to show a protest in Qatif on Friday. A report in the British independent newspaper says up to 10,000 extra troops are being sent to the region. Well, Saudi Arabia's ruling family wants to avoid scenes like those in neighboring Bahrain. There, Shias have been holding mass rallies against the Sunni royal family. Well, protesters have been camped out at Pearl Roundabout since last month and have won only minor concessions. On Sunday, hundreds took their campaign to Gudaibiya Palace. That's the Prime Minister's residence. Our correspondent in Bahrain, who we're not naming for his safety, has this report.
Calling for the overthrow of Bahrain's ruler, King Hamad. They're headed for Pearl Roundabout. It's been occupied by pro-democracy protesters for nearly 3 weeks. Shia opposition figures say that after years of repression and the killing of 7 protesters last month, it's time for change. Sunday started with a demonstration outside the palace where weekly cabinet meetings happen. Sunni and Shia leaders denounced the Prime Minister, the King's uncle, who's been in power for over 4 decades. And they called for foreigners given jobs in the security forces to be expelled from the country, saying the majority Shia population here is being squeezed out of public sector jobs. Hours later, the government reiterated people's right to freedom of expression, but everyone's waiting to see if they offer real concessions.
The government is, they've called for a dialogue with opposition parties and most of civic society to reach some sort of a compromise towards, some sort of a constitutional democracy.
The previous announcement of 20,000 new government jobs has done nothing to quell the anger on the streets. What's not clear is how long the protests will continue and whether the security forces will continue to keep their distance. AlJazeera, Manama.
Let's now return to our top story. Libya. Yunus Abuyu is a consultant to the United Nations Department of Political Affairs, and he joins me now live from New York. Thank you very much. Now, as the fighting is heating up in Libya, there are now questions on what the international community should be doing. Do you think military intervention should be on the cards?
Well, as you know, there has been discussions about this for a few days now, and even when the resolution 1970 was adopted, it was huge controversy on whether to use a phrase by all necessary means, which can be interpreted as a military intervention, can be seen as a green light for a military intervention. I think personally that a military intervention can be very, very counterproductive. The Libyans are very sensitive. The Libyan people are very sensitive to foreign troops inside the country. Colonel Gaddafi from the beginning was warning that basically either he rules Libya or it's going to be chaos or colonialism again. So if the Libyan people see a military intervention, this will play right into his hands and will reinforce his position against the revolution ongoing in Libya.
One of the other topics that seems to be a hot-button issue is the issue of no-fly zones. John Kerry himself has, it's a quote that's being thrown around, has been saying that many countries should be preparing for a possible no-fly zone in the event of a massacre or a massive offensive on civilians. Do you agree with that?
Well, actually, a no-fly zone, even the UN, the Libyan mission to the UN, has been talking about the no-fly zone at the beginning, less now, because no-fly zone can be actually tricky. What do we mean exactly by no-fly zone? Is it just stopping Libyan Air Force from bombing villages and populations, or does this mean you have to bomb the ground assets of the Libyan pro-Gaddafi forces before you can enforce that? Even John Kerry didn't seem to agree with what Secretary of Defense Robert Gates was saying, because Robert Gates was basically saying you cannot enforce a no-fly zone if you don't engage troops to bomb the ground defenses of the pro-Gaddafi forces. So it's all what we mean by that. A no-fly zone that just only protects people. Maybe that could be a way to help the revolution and protect the civilian population. If no-fly zone means troops on the ground and a complete control of Libya, I think maybe this is not such a good idea.
This puts the international community and the UN in a quandary, because basically what you're seeing are untrained fighters against an army which is heavily fortified, who have equipment. How do you stand back and watch this? What does the United Nations do?
Well, actually, United Nations is basically what the people, or actually what the states, the member states decide. The United Nations cannot act by itself. The Secretariat cannot act. It has to be given a green light by a resolution of the Security Council. But even the members, the permanent 5 members and the other non-permanent members within the Security Council do not seem to agree on this. The US is willing to go ahead and enforce a no-fly zone. Some European countries like the UK, France to a certain extent, even we've heard some French officials saying that maybe it's not such a good idea, while other countries are adamant, no fly zone or no military intervention. You've heard what Venezuela was saying recently. Actually, so far you have 2 proposals, either a military intervention, which might be counterproductive, or you have another proposal like the Venezuelan proposal, which is a reconciliation. And unfortunately, this other proposal does not help the revolutionaries either, because it's giving legitimacy to a government, to a leader that has lost all legitimacy. I guess the West has to find a way to help the revolutionaries and protect them. But we've taken into account the sensitivity and the controversy that a term military intervention means.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Yunus Abu Ayoub is a consultant to the UN Department of Political Affairs. Thank you for your time. But more to come on Al Jazeera, including
changing gears, how drivers in Spain are having to slow down on the nation's highways as a result of the crisis in Libya.
And a spectacular display from one of the world's most active volcanoes. Stay with us.